Hail thee well and welcome all. I'm the Jake of all trades, and if my math is still working correctly, we are on episode 8 of my Avatar campaign journal series. Last episode, the players, my party, made it to the village of Hun'Ro, where they found the Avatar, or at least the person who was impersonating the Avatar, and they managed to convince this person that they shouldn't impersonate the Avatar anymore, and they also met who would turn out to be a person who would turn out to be a recurring villain of sorts. That is Ryko, the firebender from the encounter near the end of the session. And then they also managed to send some letters off. Sindal and Fang both managed to get some letters off that they had had in their pockets for a while. They had been wanting to send these off, and I had been sort of denying it to them because none of the villages were large enough. Now, in a proper city, they are able to get these messages out, and Sindal is expecting his reply a little bit sooner than Fang is. His is going to come within a week, and as I mentioned last episode, this week passes fairly uneventfully. Sindal gets his message from his contact, and I'm going to just read here his message that he sent to the Fire Nation capital went along the lines of this. Madam Ondai, I have discovered that the Avatar is Fang Yang of the Earth Kingdom, one of the people I have been traveling with the past few weeks. I write to you requesting further instruction. Sindal's main objective, you may remember he's an agent for this secret organization called the Unseen Flame, and I haven't really said a whole lot about them yet, because they were a secret organization, and he wanted to be a part of a secret organization, Sindal did, during character creation, and I, trying to work with my players, just kind of developed this secret organization, and I was slowly developing it throughout these first few weeks of gameplay, just to kind of get a feel for it and to give him an idea of what it was going to be like. And but he still hadn't quite gotten a clear idea of what their intentions were, but I made sure that those intentions were clear when he received their response, which read thusly. Sindal, you have done well in locating the Avatar. Your next objective is to bring him, this Fang Yang, that is, to the Fire Nation capital. Failure is not an option. Use any resource at your disposal. We are counting on you. And then it's just signed with an O, which is again meant to represent Madam Ondai, who is the head of this secret organization, essentially. Someone who Sindal reports to directly. So he got his response after about a week. Like I said, Fang's took a little bit longer. His was expected to take 9 or 10 days, and he was actually pretty surprised then when I said, hey, it actually shows up on the 8th day. You were expecting it on the 9th, but it shows up on the 8th. And he's like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. And his letter that he sent out, it said, General Chu, I send this info as requested. I have discovered that I, Fang Yang, am the Avatar. I discovered this recently in the little town of Pinyao. I just landed in Hun'Ro, where I could send you this information. And after 8 days, he received his response, which read, Private Yang, 23rd Division. This information comes at a crucial time. Your presence is immediately requested in Omashu. Time is of the essence. And it is signed General Chu at the bottom. After I had told Fang that his letter had arrived a day early, and after he had had a chance to read his letter, I asked him to roll a perception check. I did not tell them what this was for, I just asked that he roll it, and he rolled very, very poorly. I think it was a natural 2 on the die, maybe even a natural 1, and so he did not notice what I had wanted him to notice. Normally this could be a problem, your players are immediately suspecting, hey, what was that information that we just missed out on? But there wasn't an opportunity for them to do so. Why wasn't there an opportunity for them to ask, you ask? Well, it's because at this point, suddenly the party hears shouts coming from the center of the village. They run outside of the tavern they've been staying at, and they can immediately see a dull red-orange glow that is illuminating what appears to be a huge column of smoke that flattens out into a large cloud of smoke covering the city and the surrounding region, making the now nighttime area even darker than it would normally be. They can also see that flocks of birds are flying in all directions, trying to escape what appears to be some sort of a forest fire. At this point, all of the players kind of immediately intuit And then they feel a very low rumble beginning to build from below their feet, and they can then begin to hear this low rumble, and slowly it grows stronger and stronger, and you can assume now at this point that there's a stampede of animals that are just traveling through the village, trying to escape this massive forest fire, it seems, and the party is now stuck in the middle of it. Guess what? It's another unique encounter. That's right. The party, and now the rest of the village, is at the mercy of what appears to be a huge stampede composed of an entire ecosystem of creatures. We've got moose lions, platypus bears, fox antelope, porcupines, hog-monkeys, and many, many others that are running by so quickly that it's difficult to discern exactly what kind of creature they are, this being the Avatar world and all. And and that's what my players had to deal with. They had to figure out what they were going to do. Like I said, it's another unique encounter. This is actually, it's more of like a skill challenge crossed with a unique encounter. I'm referencing skill challenges from 4th edition D&D. If you aren't familiar, Matt Colville does an excellent video talking about these unique encounters and how you can use them in different versions of the game to make it more exciting. That is what I did in this scenario. The party had to essentially succeed a number of checks to try to stop this forest fire from engulfing the village before the population, the people living there, had an opportunity to evacuate across the nearby river. They were counting on the river to kind of protect them from the fire, acting as like a fire break, essentially. And so the party jumped into action, but I'm getting ahead of myself because the party now contains an extra member. That is right, you may remember at the end of last video I mentioned that we are getting a new party member at this point, and I will tell you about him now. I had talked with the player about his backstory before the game had started, and so we kind of got that fleshed out. And the first part of the session, he was kind of working on filling out his character sheet, you know, choosing his feats and his skills and his weapons and stuff like that, spending a little bit of gold here and there for items, that sort of thing, character creation stuff. But we talked about his backstory a little bit, and I'll tell you about that now. His name is Kato Wee, spelled W-U-I, and he is from the Northern Water Tribe, actually. Actually, his mother is from the Northern Water Tribe. His father is actually an air nomad, and they fell in love with each other. As I said, there's a diversity of relations between benders in this world, between the kingdoms, typically, and so it's not uncommon to have parents who are of differing elements, essentially. So, they were both benders, and they fell in love with each other. Actually, no, his mother wasn't a bender. His father was. And they fell in love with each other, and that was all fine and dandy, except his father, his name being Sunwee, he disappeared when Kato was very young, only 11 or 12 years old. He left one day, and he never returned, and Kato was anxious to leave his home and try searching for his father at some point, but his mother never permitted it. She said that he must wait until his 16th birthday, and then he could try to leave and try to find his father, try to figure out what happened to him. And so, that's what he did. On his 16th birthday, he hitched up his canoe with a bunch of supplies, and he set out with only his supplies and his trusty Hog-Monkey animal companion to accompany him. That is right, he has an animal companion, and it is a Hog-Monkey. Its name is Sato the Hog-Monkey, Kato and Sato, and Kato is actually a ranger. He wanted to, he was like, well, we've got a party of 4 benders, and they cover all of the elements, and I'm not really into the bending so much, I just kind of want to play along and see what happens. And so he joined in as a ranger, and so he got to choose an animal companion, and he chose a Hog-Monkey. He said that he bought it while he saw it in a super tiny cage being sold in the Northern Water Tribe market one day, and he was like, man, I can't let that thing live in there, or somewhere worse possibly. I have to buy it and give it like a really good home. And so that's what he did. And so now he has a Hog-Monkey. Listen for that guy later. But and that's our new party member. He actually arrived in Hun'Ro just a few days ago. Actually, he'd probably been there for a couple weeks, a week or so, looking for a new lead in the search for his father, Sunwee. And in that week-long stay or so, he had actually been present when the party had kind of worked their way through town, and they had proven that Uvara was not the Avatar and stuff like that. Although that didn't happen publicly, he was in the neighborhood when those bandits attacked, and he kind of was like aware that stuff was happening around him. And but he wasn't able to really do anything because, of course, his player wasn't there, and so yeah, you know how it goes. And our party jumped into action. Fang, Tiki, and Sindal were heading for the north end of the city to try to set up some sort of a barrier to prevent the fire from engulfing the village for as long as they possibly could. Fang directed Pema to try evacuating the villagers, thinking that maybe her airbending wouldn't be as useful against a large fire of this sort. And Pema was anxious to agree. She didn't really like the idea of dealing with that stuff either, I think, and so she was all too happy to run into the village and try to start herding people out of their homes, and knocking on doors and guiding them to the south end of the village so that they could escape the wrath of this giant fire. And as I said, Kato and Sato were also here at this point, and they also decided that they were going to try helping at this point. Instead of just fleeing with the rest of the villagers, Kato also decided that he was going to try to knock on doors and try to lead people towards the southern end of the village. And he also sent out his Hog-Monkey, Sato, to complete the skill challenge for him, essentially, by also, like, hey, look to see if there's anyone who's, like, left behind, or anyone who might be hiding, or something like that, and try to bring them out, that sort of thing. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. I said, absolutely, yes. You find a small child, actually. Sato finds a small child and manages to lead him out by the hand into the village center. And Kato sees that, and helps the small child and quickly finds that child's parents with another skill check. And then that's kind of how that was going in the village, while Fang and Sindal and Tiki were defending the north end of the village from this fire. And let's not forget this huge stampede of animals that I also mentioned, tearing its way through the city that doesn't have any walls, and so the animals are free to just run through the main streets. And they're kind of tearing down Main Street, essentially, the largest street from north to south, and it's kind of like the buildings are essentially kind of funneling them all in that direction, which makes traveling up that main street very dangerous. And working their way around the stampede was actually a skill challenge in itself, I believe. They had to figure out how they were going to try to navigate this huge herd of animals. And I'm pretty sure that most of them pretty quickly were like, hey, I'm just going to climb up on the roof and then not deal with that noise. And I'm like, hey, that's a great idea. You just climb up on the roof and you don't have to deal with that noise. But there's still a bunch of villagers down there, and so I believe that was also a little bit of work. I think Fang created some large walls in between the doorways of the buildings and the actual street, kind of creating like a sidewalk, but with his walls. And that helped funnel these animals. They didn't have to be super thick walls and take a lot of a beating. In fact, they probably wouldn't have. But he was able to pull up enough of those quickly to kind of lead the animals in. It's like a bull in a china shop. An actual bull in a china shop doesn't knock over the china or the shelves or anything like that. That's one thing Mythbusters taught me. And so it kind of herds all of the animals through the center of town, and then the citizens are fairly safe to evacuate towards the south end of the village. This was a great idea on Fang's part. Now free to travel to the north end of the town, Sindal, Tiki, and Fang quickly arrive, where Fang tries building a huge wall to try and stop the fire, while he asks Sindal to put out local fires, or to start some small local fires to burn out any vegetation that might fuel the larger fire to come. And he asks Tiki to also help control those fires and to dampen the area with her water bending to help prevent this fire from coming in. I do mention to them at this point, like, hey, at this point, you guys can feel the heat, even if you can't even see the flames really yet. This appears to be a huge fire, and you are not sure that any of these precautions are actually going to make any of a difference. You don't think you're going to be able to save this village from destruction. I made that very clear to them at the very beginning of the encounter. It's like, hey, your main objective here is to save the people, not save the structures. Don't worry about the buildings. Those are a lost cause anyway. Focus on the things that you can still save, like the people. But they were trying to stop this fire for as long as they could. I had thought that they were going to run into the forest and try to battle the flames up close. But that is not what they did. They set up shop right outside the city, and that is where they focused their primary efforts. It was probably a wiser decision in all actuality. So Fang tried pulling up a huge wall as this fire began to get closer and closer once they could start to see it actually engulfing the forest in front of them, right before their eyes. Fang was like, man, he got kind of desperate. He was like, man, I'm just going to try to pull up a huge earth wall. Just a giant, like a huge wall that will help stop this fire from busting through. And I was like, man, well, I mean, you can't really make a wall that big. And he's like, what if I spend some GM points? Then can I make a wall that big? And I decided, like, hey, yeah, you can spend a couple GM points and you can make a wall that big, but you are like completely exhausted in that effort, and you are unable to pretty much do anything other than basic bending stuff for the rest of the day. Until you take a long rest, you're pretty much exhausted, essentially. And so that's what happened. He was like, you know what, that sounds acceptable. I'm going to do it. And he made that huge earth wall, and it actually probably stopped the flames for a couple turns longer than I previously intended those flames to be working their way through. And in that way, it was a success. I just realized I don't think I've talked to you guys about my Game Master points yet, my GM points. Those are, pretty simply, they're my player currency for the game. It's a way for my players to do cool stuff through their characters within the game, or to change the environment to better suit their needs within the game. It's a way for my players to interact with the world directly. It's a way that they don't have to be in character to use these points. This is like the player spending the points. And I'll probably do a video on these later, but for the moment I want to continue on with what we're talking about currently. As the fire was on top of Fang, Sindal, and Tiki, they had to make a retreat. I asked for a perception check around the table for those three players. As I said, I wanted them to go into the fire, or I was expecting them to go into the forest to battle the fire. And it was there that I was expecting that I would be able to introduce my BBG for the campaign, or my BBEG, my big bad guy, my big bad evil guy, the main villain for like the whole campaign, essentially. Like all of the episodes. This is like the main guy who's been pulling the strings. And they were supposed to go into the fire so that they could see him, but they didn't do that, and I didn't want to try to lead them into it, to goad them into it, and so I just said, okay, you don't go into the fire, you don't have that cool interaction with this character like I thought you would, but you just don't see it, you don't have that. But instead, you get a perception check after you are leaving this front line of the fire. And there was a prerequisite for this encounter. That's why I was ready for it not to happen, because it was only going to happen if Fang used his multi-bending, if he used different elements while he was bending to fight the fire. If he used a little bit of fire bending or water bending or tried to do anything else, I was going to say that then this BBG showed his face, reared his ugly head, as it were. But that didn't happen. He just used earthbending, and I made a careful note of that, and so they didn't encounter him. Instead, as I said, there was a perception check, of which I believe Fang got the highest. And so he saw what appeared to be a massive winged silhouette rush past overhead at just an incredible speed. And being so dark, it was difficult to tell exactly how far away it was. He could only really tell that it was big and that it was moving fast. Fang was curious about this, and I believe next session that he tried meditating into the spirit world to try to speak with any local spirits who might know anything about this large creature, that everybody at the table immediately, they just looked at each other and they said exactly the same words that you're thinking now, I'm sure. They said dragon. They said dragon to each other, like, man, it's a dragon, it's a huge dragon, oh my god, that's our main villain, we have a dragon. And even though I hadn't told them it was the main bad villain, the main evil guy, even though I hadn't said anything about that, they were able to infer it just from some subtle clues and their own imaginations, really. Meanwhile, they still have to deal with all of these villagers. So they go across the river quickly before the fire engulfs the city. They meet up with Tiki or not Tiki, sorry, they meet up with Pema, who is there with the rest of the villagers, and they talk with the local governor of the region, he's really sad that the village is destroyed, but he's happy all the people are alive. That's a good thing, and so he's thankful to the party that they were able to help save all of the villagers. He's actually incredibly thankful and surprised that not a single life was lost through this terrible ordeal, and for that he is incredibly thankful. And the rest of the party kind of just helps with the rest of the villagers. They feel really bad that these people don't have a place to stay anymore, and so the party tries their best to help the people. You know, they try to construct some impromptu shelter for them. They try to provide, hunt some food for them, gather some food for them quickly so that they can feed some of the people who haven't or need to be fed. And Tiki uses a lot of her water bending to try to heal these people as best she can. Anyone who was injured by, one of the wild animals or from the house catching on fire or something like that. And so, the party genuinely felt bad, and they really wanted to do everything they could do. That was really cool to see, actually. They didn't just check out as soon as, the engagement was over. They were still interested in role-playing. That's really refreshing to see sometimes. It was also during this role-playing session, or this role-playing moment, where I said that Tiki and Kato recognized each other's water tribe robes, and it was then I gave them the opportunity to actually speak with each other and introduce each other, and so then I could, get my new player incorporated with my old party, and it worked better because Kato was searching for his father, Sun Wei, and I had told Kato before the game had started that, hey, your father, the last you heard, you picked this up in Hun'Ro just the other day, you heard, that your father was last seen heading, you found someone who finally remembered him, who left this village saying that he was headed for Nanzu, those, 4 or 5 years ago, essentially. And so he's like, hey, this is the first lead I've had in this whole week or so I've been here, this is excellent, I'm headed for Nanzu. Tiki's like, hey, we're headed for Nanzu too. This is fantastic. We should all travel together then. That'll be great. We should do that. And Kato's like, hey, that's cool. A pretty experienced player, running Kato, and so he saw what I was doing, trying to incorporate him, and he was taking it easy on me through a lot of the session. As he said, he's like, I know I could have made things a lot more difficult, but I just wanted to kind of get things moving and keep things moving, and so I just wanted to just get the ball moving, essentially. And so he kind of jumped in and he rolled with everything that I said and worked with it, and and I think it went along splendidly. We managed to incorporate him very quickly. The other players took to him very quickly, and we had a new party member. Pretty exciting stuff. Although we gained a new member this session, we did also lose a member. This is the last official session where Pema was playing with the party. After this point, my girlfriend dropped out of the game, and she was no longer playing Pema. I still had Pema traveling with the party because I'm a stickler for continuity and stuff like that. But there were some events that I had written on Nanzu that eventually ended up separating Pema from the rest of the party anyway, and so that worked rather nicely in that regard. So, although they have Kato Wei from the Northern Water Tribe now, they have lost Pema of the Western Air Temple. And this ends part 1 of book 1 of the campaign that I had written up. I titled this book, The Search for the Avatar. And the next episode is going to be the first episode of part 2, book 1, and that is going to be the fight for Nanzu. And they are going to begin their flight to Nanzu. On Nanzu, they're going to meet with Hosen again, and he's going to have some important stuff to talk to them about. And they're also going to learn about the tension between the Fire Nation and the Air Nomads. And there's all kinds of other fun stuff they get up to on Nanzu. The players spent quite a bit of time on that island, several weeks in game, and out of game, several weeks, probably months actually, of sessions on Nanzu. Quite a bit of time spent there. They did all kinds of crazy stuff, and we're going to talk about all of it on the next episode of my Avatar Campaign Journal series. I thank you all so much for listening. I certainly hope that I'm going to see you again very soon.